And the ones that are smart about it are able to do it safely and respectfully, and just be able to move forward.
The first day they test you is 420. Is that irony or just punishment?
They got a weird sense of humor.
That's a very weird sense of humor. Rob talks about a cannabis culture, Calvin, in the NFL. Tell me more about that. I mean, in your estimation, how many guys in NFL locker rooms, at least in your day, did smoke?
Yeah, over 50% of the guys, whether it was a constant thing or just for social or just for healing, I would say over the half of the locker room. I would want to say way more than that, but maybe 60-70% have experience with cannabis. So sure, college involved. You're going to come in contact with these things just on the person. To find what's their choice to help them find solutions for their pain. And their whatever discomfort they have.
All right, here we are, a Friday afternoon Green Rush Live show. I'm Jimmy Young, and I'm joined again by two. We've got a David and a Dave, and that's how we will differentiate between the two. Dave Briggs, first of all, great job on the interview. I really expect a lot of people to check it out because it was fun, first of all, to see you back on camera, Dave.
Yeah, it was good to be back on camera, Jimmy. Good to see you, my friend. And Calvin Johnson, both he and Rob Sims, I think are the kind of guys that can normalize this conversation. I think you need some former athletes that are well-spoken, successful, thoughtful guys that aren't just sitting there, smoking out of a bong, that can really bring a whole new light on cannabis that needs to be discussed out there. That they talk about the cannabis culture that exists in NFL locker rooms. You heard it there. And it exists in NBA locker rooms and across professional sports. But I think they're really going to do a lot of good, and they'll succeed in this business.
Dave, one of the things that we've talked about a lot, and if you look at the history of cannabis in this country, and David Rabinovitz is kind of a historic scholar. Can I call you that, David?
I think that's given me a little more credit than is due, but okay, I'll take it.
You've done the history of cannabis presentations at various conventions. Okay, let's just say that. That being said, I think everyone on this call recognizes that race plays a huge role with this plant. Needless to say, for generations now, law enforcement was able to target Black people and brown people because they knew, hey, we should give them a hassle because they might have cannabis on them. 4.5 more times they've been arrested than white people in the cannabis space. And to be honest with you, we all use it the same as far as the amount of percentage of users. And then here we have a great example, again, of a couple of athletes now that have embraced the cannabis culture, that understand that there's a great opportunity here for business. And they're also very comfortable talking about the role it played in their lives and in their professional lives as athletes, right?
Yeah, I mean, they talk about, so Calvin Johnson used cannabis going back to his days at Georgia Tech when he was a 2-time All-American and the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. And, the interesting thing is about both of them, he and Rob Sims both playing 9 years in the NFL. I said, you guys smoked regularly? And they said, yes. I mean, in some cases daily, but at the very least, a couple times a week to deal with their pain. I said, you weren't in any fear of getting busted? And they said, no, none, zero. We had no fear of getting caught. Everyone in the league knows how to get around it. Now, how does Josh Gordon get repeatedly busted over and over and over again? That I don't know, but these guys smoked regularly with no fear. And again, said 50+% of guys in the locker room at that time smoked. I can only assume it's gone up since then because it's far more normalized and far more legal. So I would think 3/4.
Absolutely. And that really, when I was discussing that with someone in the industry, it was like, oh yeah, we knew that. It is one of those things that is known, but not talked about a lot. And I can give you a little insight about Josh Gordon, if you don't mind, because he was in the substance program. He had been, once he tests negative, you go in that program and then you can be tested randomly. As a regular NFL player, they announce when they're going to be tested. And Dave, what did you learn about that?
I couldn't believe it. I almost fell out of my chair when Rob Sims just casually mentioned that the first day every NFL player is tested is on 420. And I said, could that possibly be a coincidence? And they both said no. Zero chance that's a coincidence. They have a very, in their words, sick sense of humor. I mean, it's really ironic. And you mentioned race, and I can't help but think race also played into how long it took the NFL to evolve on this issue. Oh. We know all the owners are white, old, wealthy, conservative men who probably hate the thought of cannabis, marijuana legalization. But now that they're able to make a buck off of it, it is changing. One other thing, Jimmy, and I think this is going to be the moment for cannabis, is the day that Calvin Johnson goes in the Hall of Fame. And by the way, he said, look, I am not the first regular smoker in the Hall of Fame. I know several others that just don't want to say it. But I said, will you mention marijuana in your Hall of Fame speech? He said, you bet I will. I haven't gone this far without taking the opportunity to mention it. So the NFL, whether they say it or not, they are granting $1 million for pain research with the NFLPA. They're not going to like that. They are not going to like arguably a top 3 or 4 wide receiver in the history of the game mentioning marijuana in his Hall of Fame speech. I can't wait to hear that speech. It's going to be a big moment for the industry.
I think so too. And remember, the Hall of Fame is the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Even though we know it's filled with NFL players, it's not under the NFL brand, if you will. Right, Dave?
Yeah, it is the Pro Football Hall of Fame because you do see guys get in on their Canadian achievements alone. But let's be honest, that thing is there because of the NFL.
Right. The
Hall of Fame inductions are only front page news because of the NFL and the backdrop of the Hall of Fame game. So the NFL being a $10 billion business, the Hall of Fame is only associated with really the National Football League. So that's going to be a very big day. And I think Calvin can really change this conversation. And no disrespect to Rob, but having one of the greats of all time normalize this primarily as a medicine. Now he smokes for recreational and personal use as well, but primarily for medicinal use. And Jimmy, he said that he couldn't get through Dancing with the Stars without cannabis. Someone introduced him to topicals, and he said literally he was going to quit the show until someone gave him a THC topical, which was one of the things that changed his life. And that prompted him to want to get in this business, which is interesting. Who'd have thought?
Well, I tell you what, Rob Gronkowski tells a very similar story about his use of a CBD topical as well that was handed to him by his father. So look, you and I, we could sit here. We understand that the NFL for years really just gave their players tons of painkillers, tons of opioids. It was like, I don't want to say it was like candy, but it was like candy.
No, it was.
Right. And now they've given all of $1 million to research, which should tell you, the insightful sports person that you are, that they're just doing it for window dressing. If they really wanted to do research, it wouldn't have been limited to $1 million. And I think they said something like, yeah, we're going to give 5 grants out at about $200,000 a piece. Well, you know, if you really want to do research on this, I think a company, a business like the NFL, $1 gazillion business could probably afford a few million more to put research in it if they really cared. Am I right?
Sure. Well, 2 things. First, to the candy, like, yes, it was described as several players to me literally as candy. Jason Taylor, the Hall of Famer, is a good friend of mine. And he said they literally would fill him full of anything to get back on the football field. Now, he was the first one to say, I was a man. I had a choice in the matter. I would have taken anything to get on the football field. But that's not the case with Rob Sims. Rob Sims tore his pec off the bone, and he said they gave him, in his words, a fistful of OxyContin without any real careful instructions about how to use them. And Rob said, this doesn't seem like a good choice for me. And right there on the spot, that was the first time he had ever used cannabis. He did not use it at Ohio State. So that was the moment for him. As for the $1 million, yes, it's a joke. They should make it $100 million. But I would argue the the converse point. I don't think the money matters. I think the symbolic gesture that they are waving the flag means far more than the dollar amount. The fact that they are reducing their testing standards, reducing the fines and punishments, and now looking at research, I think we have now entered a whole new era with the NFL and cannabis. And that means more than the amount of money here.
No, absolutely. And of course, there's been so much research done on the effects of football on these guys that play this game for our enjoyment and our entertainment, and the long-term brain issues with CTE that have obviously reared their ugly heads throughout history is now obviously being researched on a regular basis. In fact, the BU group here in Massachusetts is really kind of famous for what they've come up with that. Let's talk.
Well, they've partnered with Calvin and Rob as well. Chris Nowinski and the Harvard guys, they have a partnership with BU and Harvard. Yeah.
Right. And Dr. Robert Stern heads up that whole program. And gosh, I'd love to get him back on this show. He and I have hung out together at least once in our lives. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about why you are so anxious to do this show called The Cannversation, and why you decided to contact me and say, whatever you're doing, I want to work with you.
Well, I really, for about the past year, have been bothered by the mainstream conversation. As someone who's worked at CNN and NBC Sports and Turner Sports and Fox News, I'm bothered by the conversations about on the mainstream media. And I'm bothered by the mainstream media furthering these stigmas. It's just really disappointing, the conversation that goes on in the national media. I've been very disappointed by it. In fact, I've been on the fence about the only thing that gave me pause is agents telling me, look, if you start talking about marijuana, you're probably not going to get a national anchor job again. And so that was a risk that I am now taking. Why did I want to contact you? Because you guys are having the right conversation, the conversation I want to have. And I think pairing someone like myself from the national media with these guys like Calvin Johnson, like Paul Pierce, I hope like Ricky Williams and Gary Payton and Chris Webber, just to mention a few, I think those combinations of people from the opposite sides of the track and opposite worlds can really shed the right attention on cannabis, on marijuana, and hopefully have a better conversation about it. The media needs to evolve. In fact, one of the guys I worked with at Turner Sports, who you all know, but I can't mention his name right now, he told me when we were hosting an NCAA tournament show, pot saved my life. He said, I was addicted to all sorts of drugs, opioids. I was going to die. Marijuana saved my life. And I said, so why don't you talk about that? And he said, because this place will fire me.
Right.
And it was so soul crushing to hear a guy can't talk about what saved his life because a network will want to let him go. So we really need to help out this conversation.
Yeah, and we will. And it's interesting you mentioned that about a member of the media. You know, there are plenty of members of the media who partake in cannabis. Okay. I think we both know that very well. That being said,
more than 50%.
Right. I was going to say, interesting enough, a friend of mine who's still on the air and still someone I have a lot of respect for made a great point. He says, I was smoking a joint on my backyard in my deck. Okay. And if someone took a picture of him smoking a joint and shared it on social media, he would have lost his job. But if he was drinking a beer, no one would have cared. And that's a perfect example of the double standard that still exists in media today. And I can't tell you how many times, Dave, I've heard that phrase, cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life.
Yeah. It's funny though. I will say I saw a great moment just the other day and I believe it was Good Morning America. No, it was the Today Show of all shows. And they were talking about joints for
jabs,
vaccines, joints for jabs, in Washington.
That was in Weed Talk News this week. I'll just have you know. Go ahead.
Good plug. And when they talked about it, I was really curious what the reaction of the anchors would be. And I was very heartened by Al Roker saying, I think I need to get another vaccine, because I thought they would have this uncomfortable moment where they pretended that they don't know what cannabis. Whoa.
That's all right. It's probably Dave's dogs. Go ahead.
No.
David's dogs.
So it was nice to see Al Roker kind of further the conversation. To me, this was the guy saying, I smoke weed. It sure felt like that to me. That was a nice moment. So they're coming along, but yeah, it's not just if you were having a beer. I mean, everything is glamorized about alcohol. Doing shots, being wasted is a great thing. But smoking a vape pen to make you feel better would get you fired. You're right. It needs to change.
The other half of that joints for jabs story is that the liquor industry in Washington State now has a shots for shots campaign. So if you get a shot, you get a shot. Again, I equate the treatment of both of those adult use products as long as you use them responsibly. It's what we preach every single week on this show. David Rabinovitz, how many times have you heard me say it's a whole new
weed out there? Use it responsibly.
Thank you. You're doing a great job. That Rabinovitz guy is a sidekick. He does a hell of a job here, But we laugh about this, but you're right, Dave. Totally want to embrace the normalcy of the fact that New York State now has it legalized. Okay. They're going to be rolling out their campaign. And again, if Al Roker happens to enjoy it, it shouldn't be that big a deal now. It just shouldn't be. And that's the whole premise of where we're going and where I expect the world to turn in this progressive movement that people are calling the green rush. And that also goes to the investment side of things too. Dave, first of all, I know you're up against it a little bit. I don't have any more questions for you. I do want to ask you one thing, though, about Paul Pierce. You mentioned Paul Pierce. That, too, is in this week's Weed Talk News, that his Truth strain is coming to Massachusetts, a dispensary called the Hubcraft. Now, hopefully you get a chance to talk to Paul. You know what happened to him when it comes to being publicized for use and partying. He lost his job at ESPN, right?
Yes, but it was, look, ESPN hasn't commented on this publicly. I think it had to do with a few more things than smoking a joint, but clearly Paul Pierce was as high as a kite on, I believe it was Instagram Live. Right. I think there were some other factors involved, but I'll be curious if Paul is able to talk about that if we are able to sit down next week. It certainly was played into it, though. I can tell you that. I don't know if it was the only factor involved in his dismissal. He did a good job, and he was a star at ESPN. So I'm not sure if there's legislation pending there or not, but
you mean litigation? You mean you think there might be a lawsuit?
Litigation, excuse me. Yeah, I would assume he won't talk about it, but we'll find out next week. But look, I mean, Paul Pierce, the Truth, and Ricky Williams has Heisman coming out, and Chris Webber, and these guys are embracing their own signature strain as well, and Gary Payton. So, I think it would help if we had a little more widespread. Joe Montana is an investor in a cannabis company, but he won't talk about it publicly. It would really help if we had let's just throw out a name, and I'm not saying he smokes pot, but an Aaron Rodgers, a Matt Stafford, a white quarterback figure who would come out publicly and say that but that I don't expect that anytime soon.
Well, there's actually a very famous quarterback that we all know who it is. I believe they refer to him as the GOAT, who believes in alternative medicines and also a plant-based diet. And I'm talking about Tom Brady. And I'm not saying I know absolutely anything about that. I do not. My point is, this is a plant medicine. That's all my point is. It isn't a drug. It's a plant medicine. And that changes the whole dynamic when you start thinking of it like that. And hopefully we'll see some descheduling. It's going to be called the Cannversation with Dave Briggs, basically a candid conversation about cannabis with Dave Briggs. Dave, we're so very excited to have you. The show will debut Wednesday night. I think we've got it pegged in to make appointments at 9 p.m. That's when we're going to live stream it on our network. Wednesday night this week. That'll be the interview you did with Calvin Johnson and Rob Sims to kind of kick off the whole Cannversation era here on Pro Cannabis Media. So, Dave, thank you so much again for joining us. Appreciate it. It is the time when we take a break because it's 420. And I think we all know that that is the time to celebrate, especially on a Friday afternoon, the culture of cannabis. So first of all, good luck with the family. I know you've got something going on. Good luck with that. And we will check in with you later in the week. In the meantime, we're going to celebrate our 420 break like we always do on this show by playing one of my favorite songs by Jonathan Edwards, Shanty. It's my version of the Waldos where this whole 420 thing started. We'll be back with more after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I'd forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, you know, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
nice. It's Friday. Thank you.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Hi, I'm Ben Shire, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
One.
All right, welcome back to the Green Rush Live, and we're live streaming every Friday afternoon from 4 p.m. Eastern to 6 p.m. Eastern, and we actually live stream until 6:30 because following this show, we do our weekly Weed Talk News program. Now, joining us on our Green Rush Live talk show this afternoon is a friend, an attorney, and also a dispensary owner, part owner anyway. Blake Mensing joins us. Blake, good to see you.
Good afternoon.
And I know you know Mr. David Rabinovitz, who's the sidekick and co-host of this show.
Good to see you, Attorney Mensing. I see you're out in the woods of weed.
Indeed.
Blake, there's been a couple of interesting things, and we are waiting for a very special guest from California to call in. We really hope that we're joined by this gentleman. His name is Kevin Ahasey. He's the CEO of Eco Cannabis in Oakland. And before I build him up, I think we'll wait to see if he actually shows up. But in the meantime, let's talk to Blake about what's going on in the New England area, where it looks like Connecticut may be the next legal state. Now, the House of Representatives in Connecticut have kind of slowed down the Senate version of a bill that was ready to go. What effect will having Connecticut, another New England state, vote in adult use legalization? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for the Massachusetts market, or is it there's enough to go around?
In the short term, we'll definitely see a little bit of a drop off. Obviously, if people can, take a shorter trip in state in Connecticut, they're not going to cross the border to come here. So there will be a dip, I think, especially on those, southern Massachusetts stores. Long term, though, the more states that legalize, the better it is in totality for the industry. We're sort of, just to use a sort of imprecise metaphor, with gay marriage, it sort of hit a tipping point of a certain number of states that had legalized it. And then the feds, as they always do, caught up really late. So in cannabis, we're past that tipping point in terms of number of cannabis states as compared to the gay marriage states. So I think that momentum builds with each new state that comes online.
Yeah, both are very progressive issues, and sometimes the progression bus gets derailed sometimes in this country because of a variety of factors, mostly the two-party system that seems to be under attack again. And not that I want to get into politics and all that. I do want to ask you about out of state. You're involved with Holyoke Cannabis, correct?
Yep.
What can you give me a percentage? Have you been able to look at the books and to see where the customers are coming from as far as like a percentage of in-state residents versus a percentage of out-of-state residents? Do you have any figures on that?
I don't have the exact numbers. So I'm a minority owner. I don't really have an operational role. My understanding is that we've gotten a fair number of license plates in the parking lot from out of state, which is a little bit of a sticky situation. Some cannabis operators in state will put up a billboard in another state and say, just over the border here. I think that's personally insane and really unwise. You can accept an out-of-state license. I certainly think advertising in another state is just plain dumb because it's a direct, middle finger to the federal prohibition, which at baseline, all of the stores, everything that's happening in the cannabis industry in the state is already offensive to federal law. So,
do you think we're going to get any movement on that? It's like, it's very slow going in Washington, D.C. right now because of what's going on, the whole culture down there. You agree?
So I think law is complex enough once they actually are real. So I don't spend too terribly much time thinking about what a politician will or won't do because you can't rely on what they say in terms of what they might do next. So I just find them to be, bags of hot air that I don't personally like listening to. I paid a little bit of attention to what's going on, at the federal level. There's sort of a perverse incentive for them not to accelerate the pace of federal legalization. And that's from, our good friend, Internal Revenue Code Section 280E, which means they actually get more dollars today by treating it, as a controlled substance than they might, if they do, and I do think they will, impose a federal tax when interstate commerce becomes a thing. So, we've heard a lot from, Majority Leader Schumer about getting this and making this a priority. And then you just have this whole, cluster of nonsense around the filibuster and the myth of bipartisanship. I lived in DC for 5 years and I still wasn't super politically inclined even when I lived there. But yeah, I think it would take an elimination of the filibuster for that to have a real chance of passing anytime soon at any level of the federal legalization happening.
David, what's your view from afar of Washington, D.C. in our political system right now and the role that this filibuster is now playing?
I have mixed feelings. I get get rid of the filibuster so that 51% can pass laws. There's something to be said for requiring 60%, right? Otherwise, you run into the problem of if you 51% can pass it, all you need is a couple of seats to flip, and then the new group comes in and they undo it. And I think it's way too polarized. I think people should be looking toward the middle. They're not looking toward the middle. The liberals are looking left. The Republicans are looking right, and they're not trying to find common ground.
My thinking of what's super broken about politics, you can have different viewpoints on the same set of facts. We're at the point where facts can't be agreed upon, and that's why nothing happens. So this whole, the remnants of, Trump's presidency are, if I yell about something and if I repeat a lie often enough, my supporters will believe it. And no matter what fact you put in front of them, they won't listen. So, I'm not a super political person, but facts matter a great deal to me. And a fact doesn't care if you yell at it or are angry at its existence. It just is. So we need to get beyond that.
Blake brings up a good point. And so I have a question for you. This is a can you see the magnet in my hand?
Sure.
If I put it to my forehead, it falls off. Does that mean my vaccine is no good?
I've seen that going around.
So Jimmy, what happened is a medical doctor testified to the Ohio legislature that vaccines cause body magnetism. And in fact, if you take metal and put it to your forehead after the vaccine, it'll stick there because your body becomes a magnet. Now, how the Ohio Medical Society hasn't taken steps to revoke that to schedule a hearing to revoke their license is beyond me. But I agree with what Blake is saying. When we get to the point where licensed officials, licensed professionals and officials are basically making shit up, and nobody seems to care, it's a problem.
Hey, who let the dogs out?
Don't get my dogs started. It's unfortunately not illegal to be stupid, and it never will be, of course.
That's a great quote, Blake. Wait a second. That's a great quote. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just facts are facts, whether you hate their existence or not, and that's what it boils down to me. But the whole federal prohibition of cannabis was predicated on lies and repeated lies, and even today you hear it from prohibitionists. Oh, well, the gateway theory. Well, that's been disproven, but I remember it. Well, that just because it was said doesn't mean it's true.
Right. And speaking of which, guys, let's talk a little bit about misinformation, and licensing, for instance, in communications. And I've been talking about this a lot with different people, and it's an interesting fact that I haven't heard too many people espouse. You know, the Federal Communications Commission issues licenses to commercial radio and TV stations who broadcast information over the air to protect the public. Okay, now we'll get into the quotes and protecting the public in a minute here. The problem with what's happened now in our world is that the consumer is in charge of their use of media, access to media, and the ability to create their own content without a license to do that. Television and radio stations still have to apply and get their licenses to broadcast to be renewed. What is the difference between over-the-air broadcasting and using Wi-Fi, which right now is how the majority of the world actually gets their information? And I believe that this is one of the reasons why we have the wild, wild west as far as information being spewed out there. And yet we all know that yelling fire in a crowded theater is not right. And
it's illegal.
It's illegal, right? But it's not illegal to broadcast your opinions now on the internet and be enjoyed over Wi-Fi. And I know this is gonna get into the, one of those little funky amendments about the freedom of speech and the freedom of press. Well, there are certain things that you don't need to know about or even should be shared about because it feeds hate speech. And I think most non-stupid people, Blake, recognize that hate speech is not good. That is, you want to protect the public from hateful doctrine, correct? Now, am I espousing censorship? No, I'm actually preaching guidance. Guidance.
I think it comes down to educating people to the point where they can determine on a legitimate factual basis whether what's being presented is true or not. So, the fact that people see something on the internet obviously does not mean it is true. I've also seen a lot of people say, oh, well, I researched this topic, so I know. Your amateur Googling is not research. I'm sorry, it's not research from an academic perspective. So, going back to your statement about the FCC licensure, my suspicion would be that that's partially because of the strength of the broadcast signals required to transmit radio or television waves. For Wi-Fi, yes, it's radio waves, but it's very low power levels and from a much smaller hub. So yeah, you can choose which media sources you go to. The abolition of the fairness doctrine, which I think was Reagan, where you had to present both sides, I think did a disservice. And then frankly, I blame Twitter for a lot of today's problems. A, it gave everyone a platform. B, it sort of encouraged this nastiness and the ability to say things you would never dream of saying to someone in person.
Anonymously.
Right. No, it's not good for social discourse. You can say anything you want without consequence.
Right. And again, this goes to one of the reasons why I think this country is more divided now than ever before, because one side believes one set of information wherever they're getting it from, and the other side is trying to at least look at facts and science and tell those stories. And it's a very dangerous time. It really is a very dangerous time. It's something I continue to be extremely concerned about.
It's very sad for our education system that people can believe half of what comes out on the internet.
And yet I got to tell you guys, I'm fascinated by this story unto itself. I went to a prestigious liberal arts school in the greater Boston area named Tufts University. I got a great education there. I was a history major, which as I look back was old news. I've been in news and newsrooms now for 30 years. And, now I'm not in the newsroom anymore. Now I'm on the outside looking in. But I studied African-American history And I thought I got a great education. And yet I never heard about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma until about 2 years ago.
Right.
And,
Well,
and that tells me a lot. That tells me that back then, the white capitalist who controlled substances and what was good for and what wasn't good for, I'm talking about Mr. Hearst, Mr.
Yep.
DuPont, who fueled reefer madness and also funded it and brought the DEA into existence with Harry Anslinger. David, you know all about this because we talked about this. They were behind all that. And yet here we are with cannabis right in the middle of the political debate now. And 80 years later, we're fighting the same misinformation that was spewed for 80 years. I don't know where we're going to go and how we're going to write this. Anybody got any ideas?
honestly, and this is harsh, I think we need to stop listening to people on the prohibitionist side of the coin. So all these people who express the concerns with public health, this plant has been part of human civilization for thousands of years. In the grand scheme of human vices, it's not that bad because it biologically can't kill you. So all these hysterical claims of it will lead to other drugs, or it will reduce your IQ or reduce employee productivity or make things unsafe. I don't ever advocate for impairment on the job, but a drug test that shows you have THC in your system does not indicate that you're impaired or not. And yet there are many professions where you cannot have that job if you have THC in your system, even though it would be perfectly acceptable, to have an 8-ball of or a high ball of scotch at the end of the day and go to work the next morning because you sobered up. So yeah, I think there's been a lot of airtime given to people who have no factual legs to stand on. And in an effort to have a fair and balanced discussion, you hear a bunch of bullshit.
And I think people just like to hear their own voices sometimes, Blake, right?
I've certainly been accused of that.
David, have you ever been accused of that?
Possibly.
All right. Well, that's interesting. Let's go to delivery, since we are going to be talking about delivery, at least in the second hour of the program. And we are still efforting getting Kevin, by the way. I know that our producer's working with his people to try and track him down to see where he was. The funny thing is the guy just posted on LinkedIn about a half an hour ago. And I said, hey, I'm looking forward to talking to you, but that's okay. We move on because this is what you have to do when you're in a live situation. The delivery license was commence operations in Massachusetts this week with a company called Freshly Baked out of Taunton. Mm-hmm. I believe, as I read these stories, that there's a limit to the area that the Freshly Baked delivery group can operate in. Is that accurate, guys?
Yes. So basically what has to happen is a municipality has to tell the commission that they're going to let their citizens receive a delivery at their private homes. I personally find that incredibly offensive to democracy. Mm-hmm. What possible difference could it make to my neighbor if an unmarked van comes to deliver something that I'm allowed to possess, grow, and receive delivery if it's a medical label on it versus an adult use? So I've actually proposed it in Holliston, where I live, as well as David, to allow that. And one of the select women, she said, well, we want to hear from the public health community. And I had to physically bite my tongue because that ship has sailed. It is part of the legal landscape here. And frankly, if my town elects to block my rights to get adult use delivered to my house, I'll probably end up suing them because I think that's a gross overreach of their authority. They just don't, it doesn't have any bearing on what, is delivered to my house to any neighbor. And I made a sort of flippant comment. I said, hey, if you don't want cannabis delivered to your home, don't order it. Right.
Or if you don't like what's going on in the community, leave the community. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's just how I feel. Let's go back a second. If you were a medical card holder in Holliston, however, can you get your medicine delivered or not?
Correct. 100%.
You can.
Yep.
You cannot.
You can. And there's been not one incident in the whole history of medical delivery, which makes the requirement on the adult use side that they have forward-facing body cameras, which of course ignores the fact that someone could sneak up behind them, is just laughable. It's again, pandering to prohibitionists.
And again, this is one of the things that drives me nuts about regulation, compliance. I really do believe that the government in this state is doing everything possible they can to retard not only the launch, but the growth of this industry.
Absolutely. That comes, filters down from the governor's office. It certainly was reflected in the initial composition of the Cannabis Control Commission. 5 commissioners, 4 of whom voted against the creation of the industry. Right. So yeah, again, just all these people who lost, that's how democracy works. Sometimes you don't get your way, make better arguments the next time. They're doing things in a way, I think, intended to obstruct things. And they've been successful because they operate the levers of power.
And yet here we are a few years into legalization and adult use in Massachusetts since 2018. And I think the number is 134 dispensaries are open in Massachusetts. David, you're the numbers guy.
About 140, I think.
140. And yet plenty more are applying and plenty more are scheduled to open, correct?
Correct.
Absolutely.
So it hasn't stopped the growth of the industry. It just, again, retarded the growth and retarded the launch of it. And it does seem like there's a very good legal argument here about this whole delivery snafu. Do you actually expect that who's going to enforce the fact that the unmarked van is driving through a town that hasn't voted it in? I mean, they're not going to be allowed to go make deliveries.
No, the towns can't block the passage of vehicles. They can block the receipt of a delivery to their citizens. Okay. So again, it just makes no sense to me that even if it was a no on 4 town, if I can grow it, if I can possess it, if I can have medical delivered because it's illegal to zone out a medical facility, it just doesn't, it's not preventing anything except trampling on my rights in my own home.
And I don't understand.
Because drugs are scary. Remember, that's the whole narrative. This is a scary plant.
Okay. This is not a drug. This is a plant that is also a plant medicine. Okay. Just like there's a plant diet, right? There's a lot of people out there who are vegans that I have a lot of respect for because it takes tremendous discipline to avoid all dairy, right? And anything that an animal is involved with and still have a healthy lifestyle. And I might add that actually have a more healthy lifestyle, right? And yet we have no problem with plant diets. But when it comes to plant medicine, because of the 80 years of misinformation and the stigma and all this, I mean, at some point, a bell or a light has to go off. And if you look at the percentages now of the people in all these polls, right? I think it's 91% of Americans believe that cannabis has a medicinal quality to it. And I believe it's 68% now who believe it should be legalized. Okay. And I don't think anybody that we've talked to, and a lot of people on this show, David, don't want it legalized at the federal level because they don't believe the government can create a system that would be fair and just.
I don't even know if it's the system of being fair and just. It's business competition. As soon as it becomes legal at the federal level, what we think of as the big players in this business, those are going to be the small players, and everybody else will just be dust. Like I've said this many times. A few years ago, a company wrote a $4 billion check, which caused a firestorm in the markets and valuations took off to invest in a marijuana business in Canada. Imagine the size of the company that you need to have to be able to write a $4 billion check to take a flyer on a marijuana investment. And then a couple of years later, most of your investment's up in smoke and it doesn't pull you down. When it becomes legal, those are the companies that are coming into this business. So it's not going to be like the next town over from us, Jason Raposa, who's starting a beverage company, nice small little company. It won't be the Jason Raposas coming into the business. It's going to be Coca-Cola, Pepsi, major players like that when it becomes federally legal.
The Boston Beer Company, the maker of Sam Adams, now has a cannabis department. So they're already planning. And that's a small fish compared to the Anheuser-Busch's of the world. I agree 100%. We haven't seen the real dollars be thrown around yet.
No, we haven't. And that's a very good point. And yet, as you guys know, because you're involved. I know you know more about investments than I do, but I know that golden rule is you only invest in the amount of money that you can lose. And if there's a company out there that can lose $4 billion, still survive, that means that, yeah, there's a level of big business that's kind of looking at all this stuff going on right now. And I would think they're licking their chops in many ways, but it's going to be 5 years, maybe even longer. I think. I do not think it's going to happen this year. I do not think it's going to happen before the next election either.
I mean, my hope in terms of big business not completely dominating, they're certainly going to win the race to the lowest price per unit because they have economies of scale, and it's a matter of perspective. Because like you said, if someone can have $4 billion and lose it, they're obviously operating with a much bigger war chest than most operators. The thing with cannabis that I think is in guarding against that is it doesn't scale in terms of producing the best possible quality. So I think as more people consume cannabis, as the stigma starts to fall away and you see someone light up a joint at a 4th of July barbecue and no one bats an eye, when you experience the plant long enough, I think eventually your tastes become more sophisticated. So, did I drink Bud Light in my 20s? Yes. Would I drink it now? Maybe, but it's gross, right? I don't go out and be like, oh, great, Bud Light. It's not a good beverage. Objectively, it's not good. And they don't care. They just want to sell as many as they can.
Right.
So I think you'll just have the people who either, are new or they have the lower budget and they're going to buy the mass-produced, corporate mids, and they'll be happy with that. I have hope that the people who give a damn about the plant and pour their passion and love into its cultivation, they're going to produce better products and be able to, win that battle, because I think there'll be fewer gladiators, because the big people will say, oh, you're leaving dollars on the table. You're bad at business. And they're missing the point that people genuinely enjoy the plant and the experience around it. It's not just about, oh, I want to be high for the cheapest amount possible.
Right. Exactly right. And there are connoisseurs out there. There are people out there who are looking at this industry like the microbrew industry or the wine industry. And there's going to be craft cultivars and higher end quality seeds that are going to produce a better, higher quality of product, right? I mean, that's the point of this. And you think that's where it's going to go, Blake?
I hope. There's a great book called Craft Weed by an environmental law professor named Ryan Stoa. And that was the thesis, that there's going to be ways to differentiate that aren't based on your scale or your ability to produce at the cheapest possible unit price. It's, I don't know. People don't get excited when you bring Bud Light to a cocktail party when you're past 30, right? I mean, you're like, whoa, who's this guy? So I think there's just going to be a scaling up of the sophistication of people who consume it as more people do it and more people are willing to talk about their consumption.
Yeah. I am amazed, by the way, that the amount of Bud Light one person can actually put in their body and still function.
I will not tell you my high score.
Well, I will tell you, I'll quickly tell you an anecdote about a friend of mine who will go unnamed, a comrade in business, who was a great golfer, a great amateur golfer, and actually had a Bud Light per hole. That's 18 holes, people, 18 Bud Lights, and was 2 over par. Okay, that means he shot a 74, which, by the way, would be my dream round. Let's just say, because 100 is the average score in golf. So you get the idea. But to be able to do that and function is just beyond me. And yet I know, let's reverse that for a second. And let's say somebody took 18 bong hits, okay? The effect on your golf game is really an individual thing. Some people rave about being able to play high, others not so much. And I'm guessing the same thing goes for alcohol. And I really do like it when the two adult use products have similarities as far as how it's being accepted in our world, because that to me is where we're going or trying to go for normalization. Is alcohol continues to be accepted and be part of our society for decades and generations. And, cannabis is just trying to get equal rights, if you will.
For sure. I'm just chuckling because if you can arrange a golf tournament where there's a bong rip per hole, that's the only scenario where I would go golfing.
Why don't we put that together?
That shouldn't surprise you, Blake. Okay, I know one.
I would do that. Mini golf's more my speed, but yeah, that might get me on the course.
David, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
No, I just I made the comment of, gee, Blake, maybe we should put that together. I wonder how many people we could get to participate in a golf outing where we're going to have a bong rip at each hole.
Guys, there's a tournament that already exists that has this. All right, I'm not going to start giving you the specifics of it, but when the show is over, if you'd like me to enlighten you a little bit, I'll be happy to. I have never played in that tournament. I want to make sure everybody understands that, but it's out there. Let me real quick, because we're getting up close to the top of the hour. The celebrity brand in cannabis. We talked a little bit about the craft and the micro brew, the micro the cultivar, the specific cultivar. How much of a role do you see the celebrity brand playing here? We've got, in the last few weeks, we've had the Jerry Garcia hand-picked brand. We've had Tommy Chong's Choice. We now have Paul Pierce's Truth brand coming to Massachusetts. And I know that, is it the Cookies brand has the, who is it? He's a hip hop artist, right? I mean, because I
never heard of him outside of the weed.
Is it Burner? Is it Burner?
Yeah, that's his name, but yeah, I couldn't name a song of his. I think it depends on the celebrity. You know, I don't make my choices based on which celebrity does anything, frankly, because they're just people. But if they were known, you know, so like Jay-Z, he certainly got hip hop roots, and weed was part of his rapping. So that doesn't seem like a stretch to me in any way. I have no idea about Paul Pierce or his consumption. He's obviously you know, somewhat of a local celebrity here. I think it portends good things in that, you know, people like Martha Stewart are on, you know, I think Canopy or Aurora's or one of those Canadian companies' boards. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's, I think, shocking to some. Really depends on the celebrity, in my opinion. But I think there's some value, especially in Massachusetts, where, you know, if you were to say, you know, what's the top brand in Massachusetts cannabis? There's not really a good answer quite yet.
Right. Well, you know, to me, it's the one that is in front of me. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I don't have a very high discerning. I don't like to get totally wasted again. Those days are long gone. Sure. But you know what? But I think, Blake, you've explained it, on the clock, off the clock, right? I mean, absolutely. Right. And that's just how I feel. And there are other things we could talk about, but as usual, Blake, you've done a great job. I really want to thank you for coming in on short notice.
You got it.
We weren't sure what was going to happen, and we do feel a little disappointed that this guy, Kevin, was not able to make it onto our show today, because he does have a great, compelling story to tell. And I won't take it personally, and we probably will reach out to him again. And hopefully one day we'll get him on to talk about his company, which is a remarkable story, because it does go to prison reform, which is really where I think the next step, if we're going to expunge the records of those who've been incarcerated for low-level cannabis crimes, they need an opportunity to get back into society as income-earning and regular contributors to the world. And getting some kind of workforce development program in place for that should be part of the next step at the federal level. And this guy in Oakland, California, has been able to do that with his own vertically integrated dispensary. So I still would like to bring him back on at some point. But Blake,
to me, just one point on prison reform. I think it should be a priority to make private prisons completely illegal. When a private prison company gets a contract with the state, they have minimum bed quotas that the state must fill. How do they fill those beds? With low-level cannabis offenses.
Right. By targeting those who've been most impacted on the war on drugs, because they were born with a different colored skin than me. And that's not right. And that's
not. And if you make $1 on the confinement of someone else against their will, you are a bad person objectively. And I think you're going to go to hell if it exists.
There you go. Well, they'll have the price to pay at some point, right? But in the meantime, we've got to take a quick break. And on the other side, we're going to bring in a couple of friends, Aaron Goines and James Winokur, will be joining us. We're going to be talking about delivery. And I think we have another special guest who might call in, but I'm not going to name him because I don't want to put pressure on him either. But we'll continue with more of the Green Rush Live here from Pro Cannabis Media on a Friday afternoon after this. Blake Mensing, always a pleasure. And check out Holyoke Cannabis, right?
please do.
All right. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. And you know, when I started Pro Cannabis Media 2 years ago, I wanted to make sure the cannabis industry had a professional outlet to share their stories in their own words. Now, since it all started with my podcast In the Weeds 3 years ago, I've done over 250 interviews. I've met some incredible people with a shared passion for this amazing plant. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard the line, cannabis has saved my life, cannabis has changed my life. Well, now it's your turn. We want to give you a chance to tell your own story. It doesn't even need to be related to the medicinal power of this incredible plant. Just to give you a little incentive, we will pick 5 stories to share on our live Green Rush show on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern. If we share your story, you automatically get one of our t-shirts with that closing line I use all the time, "It's a whole new world of weed." But as the legendary Billy Mays used to say, that's not all. One of those finalists will win one of these really cool full-story cannabis storage units. It's a great way to store your cannabis in their food-grade aluminum containers. It's award-winning, child-proof, smell-proof, and has a solid contemporary design. It's a $220 value, but you can win one if we pick your story and feature it on our show. Yes, we will pick one of those 5 finalists, and they will receive this $220 value absolutely free. Now, we ask you to keep your story to under 90 seconds on video and less than 500 words in text. So come out of the cannabis closet and tell us your story, and you could win with yourstory.com. Just go on to procannabismedia.com and sign up today. You might even join us on one of our shows. Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
So I think there's one very important difference between me and most of my team members and other cannabis accounting firms, especially outsourced cannabis accounting firms. With a lot of the other firms, you're going to find bookkeepers or folks that were accountants for their entire career, but they were junior accountants. I've spent most of my career alongside CFOs at public companies, companies with thousands of employees, public companies. So much of my career wasn't spent in the debits and credits. It was spent with the CFO, CEO, COO of large public companies, working on strategy, working on planning and big initiatives, working on projects such as mergers and integrations. So that high level experience, along with being able to do the debits and credits and having members of my team that also have fairly senior experience and also members of the team that are junior and can do the bookkeeping at a little bit lower cost than some of the people with the experience, gives our clients a much broader depth of experience than a lot of the other firms where you're hiring someone that is just a bookkeeper and can't help with the strategy side of it, or someone that's been an executive for a long time and can only help with the strategy but can't help with the hands-on.
Hi, I'm Ben Schauer, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
Welcome back to the Friday afternoon edition of Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, and I'm always joined by my good friend,
David Rabinovitz.
There he is. And now we've got a whole new panel in this room, and we're excited to bring in some of our friends, people that are friends of PCM, if you will. One is Aaron Goines, who's having a little trouble with his camera right now. But we can hear Aaron. So, hi, Aaron.
How you doing?
Good. There he is. An old friend, Bill Perrier, an expert on the insurance world, is with us. Bill Perrier, good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me back. Great to see you and David, and hello to Aaron.
There you go. And James Winokur, who's the CEO of Berkshire Roots out there in Western Mass, with also a location in East Boston, Massachusetts. He's with us as well. James, thank you so much for coming on today. Oh,
great to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Jim.
There you go. All right, good. Just do that just to make sure everybody's got their mutes off or at least focused on it and know which buttons to push. So we want to talk about delivery in the state of Massachusetts here, because this week, the Massachusetts people actually welcomed their first adult use delivery to the state. Freshly Baked was the company, and down in Taunton. And now those in that area can get adult use recreational cannabis delivered to their homes. James, as someone who's in the adult use world, tell me a little bit about the importance of adding delivery services for your products.
I think it's a great opportunity for people who won't necessarily get to the specific dispensary. Ours are located in Pittsfield and East Boston, but we've earned a great reputation in the state. So people who maybe that's not so convenient to come to the store, the opportunity to get it delivered, I think is really great. And I think it's another way for normalization of the industry. There's so many products. We know that's the way the world is going, to have products delivered. Certainly during the pandemic, that became even a bigger and more important thing for people. So we're going to be really happy to participate in that.
And if anything that we've learned from this pandemic and the shut-ins from COVID-19 was the fact that, you could still actually do business if the government allowed you to, and be open and go through your online portal, do your order. I love the fact that I can just go online, pick my products, hit buy, pick them up curbside. I'm in and out in 30 seconds. It certainly makes the user experience a little bit different than I think the industry expected when they first started. I want to get reaction to you guys from that, because what are some of the lessons learned from the pandemic that you think might be long lasting in the cannabis space, and what role does delivery play in that? Bill, I know you have some experience with that world.
I do.
What's your feeling about that? Has it been easier for you? Do you enjoy the experience of going into the dispensary, talking to the bud tenders, or can you find that you can find all the answers to what you really need online now?
I found that all the answers are online, and also just the old-fashioned phone call. People still have phones, and sometimes they have more time during the pandemic, during their downtime, to talk you through the products. You don't really have to be there in person. So I wasn't inconvenienced at all.
Right. And then the other side, Aaron, I know you've got your company, Emerald Turtle, ready to rock as soon as you're able to. You have invested time, effort into this delivery function and this delivery business. What are the pluses and minuses to that as far as the user experience goes?
I mean, user experience, as far as I'm concerned, it appears to me that delivery is here to stay. We all want something delivered to our house. Food, I don't even know. Everything is coming to our house. I look at all the Amazon boxes I can't even wade through that my wife keeps ordering every time I walk out my door. So I think we're now here. And I think that I believe the consumer, whether it's cannabis, whether it's anything else, has been well conditioned now to purchase basically any product online through a digitized menu. And I believe that COVID only accelerated that process from first being early adopters to the intermediate adapters to now I even have my mother who's now ordering everything online. So I believe that COVID has helped accelerate that customer experience to now realize that, hey, I can find out a lot of what I need to know online. And frankly, I look at, say, some of my neighbors who are lawyers. I have a surgeon that lives next door to me, wherever, they all smoke. But they would never, and they told me, I can never get caught dead walking into a dispensary. One of my neighbors is a superintendent of a very large school district, and she's a smoker. And she says the second I walk into a dispensary will be the day that the head of the PTA is right across the street and sees me walking in. And that'll be the end of my career. So although it's legal, I think you have a large portion of this population that has yet to experience cannabis, but wants to, but is not ready or willing to make that walk inside a dispensary for whatever reason.
Now, James, is someone who's put a lot of heart, soul, and money into a brick and mortar facility. What differentiates going into the dispensary versus the delivery experience for the consumer?
I think the larger question with an expanding set of customers who are interested in cannabis, I really do think the pie is still expanding. If we have more people who are expert, they really know what they want, and they can get that quick transaction through delivery, that's great for that segment. We still have so many people who come in the door and have no idea what they're looking at. They have no experience and they need guidance. And our team, one of the things we pride ourselves on is being really knowledgeable and able to guide people. It's going to be quite a period of time where people do get educated, and over time they become delivery customers. And a new set of people come in and they get educated, and over time they'll become delivery customers. We're, also in a East Boston community that's a walking community. So it's still going to be easy for people to just walk out of their apartment, walk into the store. They don't necessarily need delivery. So there's different segments of the market that we'll service with each one of those different styles.
There you go. There's something there and something special, I believe, walking into a facility, interacting. Now, I like to talk to people, so what a shock, right? I do like to engage in conversation with people behind the counter, whether I know what I'm going to buy or not. So I do see the value for that, especially in the biggest emerging group, the biggest demographic group in cannabis. The biggest one that's growing is that 50+ crowd that is looking to improve their wellness. And I do see that is another reason why people do want to go into the dispensary, at least for the first time, and engage in conversation with the people behind the counter. James, I got to ask you a question about your bud tenders. How do you train them? And is there a sense of amount of hours it takes to actually give them the kind of knowledge that they need? Has that been figured out yet?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting question. We have a really good foundation of training our staff at Berkshire Roots. And this year we enhanced that by creating a program on green flower media, now just called Green Flower. So we think of that as an e-learning platform. We created by job activity different tracks for people to go through, which they'll do all year long. And that each one of those has a certain number of hours associated with it. So depending on whether you're a bud tender, you're in our cultivation area, you're in the lab extraction area, there's different tracks and different hours. Initially, the first group that went through it, we accelerated by weeks the amount of time required before they could get in front of a customer. The e-learning platform is just really great. the content from Green Flower Media is great, but we also are able to put our own custom content on there as well. So we take it seriously, and I think our customers, our patients in Pittsfield really appreciate that.
Well, I tell you what, Max Simon is the founder of Green Flower, and
Yes.
Max and I have met a couple of times. I've interviewed him a few times. And when I first got my medical card in Massachusetts in 2013, that's where I went to get my knowledge. Even after I went into a dispensary that will not go named and got what I considered to be maybe not the best advice from the gentleman behind the counter. So again, I really think they do a great job. It's a California-based media company, and they've also been accepted now. I'm talking about Green Flower in, I believe, 7 or 8 universities as their curriculum providers, which I think is awesome. And again, another sign, guys, that we are starting to move towards some kind of acceptance or more acceptance and normalization. Aaron, let me ask you a question about education. When a delivery is made, you're really just bringing what was already ordered to the door of the person who ordered it, and just keeping track of all the compliance issues and all that. Is there any interaction? Is there any education that is expected when the product is being delivered to the consumer?
I believe there is an opportunity. I think you're going to have some operators that are going to treat this as purely a transactional encounter. That's fine. I hope that they do that, because we're taking the opposite approach. I'm a relationships person. I love talking, as everybody who's spoken to me knows that.
Why we love you so much, Aaron.
But I enjoy the interaction. I think, generally speaking, most people enjoy interaction. So I think there is an opportunity to be kind and courteous to the customer as you are delivering a product, regardless of whether they've already made that purchase online and they want the delivery. However, you can complete that delivery right there at the doorstep, asking simple question as, do you have any questions on what you ordered? Any questions on how you might want to consume this particular product? Or potentially like a mild warning, hey, this is a edible. I know that this was brought to your attention when you purchased it, but if you have any questions or concerns or anxieties, please let me know. We can have a conversation right here, or call this number and please talk to one of our people. So I believe that if done correctly, there's an opportunity to bridge that gap between a digitized menu and having it delivered and just being purely a courier or Uber Eat, and kind of carry that in-store experience to the customer's doorstep in an efficient manner. You can't have 15-minute conversations on the doorstep because you have a route, but I think there is an opportunity to at least create a sense of customer loyalty and develop a rapport and trust with that customer. It's not just a transactional exchange.
And Bill, you're in the insurance side of things in the cannabis space. There is a big difference between a salesperson and an order taker. Walk us through the process, if you will, of how you might approach a company, a delivery company, versus a brick and mortar facility like James has here.
Well, that's a good question. So you mean just the courier folks with no warehouse and stuff like that?
Right, exactly. Because there's different dynamics, I know.
Certainly. I mean, I don't want to paint everybody with the same brush, but the courier people I've insured to date and spoken to seem like they're really trying to go as fast as they can, transactionally. Where the bricks and mortar folks tend to have larger companies, more experienced people, they might pay a little bit better, and they're really into building the relationship. As Aaron had mentioned, it is all about relationships, especially what I do. So there's go. And then there's like, well, we have an office and we have people, and we have admins and C-level executives, as opposed to I'm going to hire 20 drivers, pay them $15 an hour, and hopefully they do a good job type of thing. So not necessarily anything wrong with it. It's just a different dynamic. Right. So what we're concerned about is really with the commercial auto is how many hours a day are these drivers driving? Are they at least 25 years of age? We instruct everybody to run the motor vehicle records before they offer employment, because a bad motor vehicle record will jack up the rates. Then people will be concerned about that. So there's really a lot that goes into it. I was wondering if I could just maybe back up a half second about the bud tender conversation we had.
Sure.
James, I'm glad to see you're training your folks really well and you have a program. The concern we have about bud tenders in the industry is most major insurance companies do not offer bud tender coverage. It's a specialty coverage. You have your general liability, your product liability, and then you have bud tender liability. And if bud tenders are not trained properly, they say something wrong and something happens, you can be in some hot water if a suit comes. So when you're talking to an insurance agent, whether it's me or anybody else, and you have a bud tender, make sure you get the right coverage and talk to them about it.
I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and we're pretty strict about making sure we follow guidelines and we aren't making any medical claims in any way, either in marketing, in the store, or with our bud tenders.
Perfect. Good.
Yeah.
And what's going on in as far as delivery and your company, James? Are you working with anybody? Tell us a little bit about how you're going to traverse the Berkshires for delivery at some point, I'm guessing.
Yeah, at some point. We're starting with Boston. You can hopefully see my background. We have the joint venture, so to speak. It's actually a good partnership with Zip Run, a social equity candidate who has their headquarters here in the Boston area, in Boston, and has already gone through the Boston Cannabis Board approval. They should be on the CCC agenda June 17th for state approval. I've actually been working with them prior to starting at Berkshire Roots. So Gabe Vieira is the CEO. I met him when I was at another cannabis company. So it's been almost 2 years that I've been working with them, somewhat as an advisor and really closely. We talk all the time. We have helped them navigate the Massachusetts cannabis industry. I have connected them to all the technologies that are needed. They've done a great job raising money, building a platform. So in addition to being a delivery company, they've created a technology, which is really a wider way for them to get in the industry. So I have been personally supporting them. We don't have any other ties other than making a really good business arrangement. So we're on the verge of hopefully any month now being the first to be able to deliver in Boston through Zip Run.
Well, congrats on that. That's awesome. And you said you've had a relationship with this guy for a number of years anyway, right?
Yeah, we started talking about their concepts, and they showed me early designs of their software, and I've just been giving them input and feedback, and connecting them to the right people that I whatever I could do to help them along the way, and that resulted in us partnering to get delivery going in Boston.
And of course, there's a company out there called Lantern. That's a software delivery company that can, I believe it actually lists a whole bunch of different opportunities for delivery and supposedly eases that shopping experience, if you will, for the consumer by getting as many different products as possible that are available for delivery. Aaron, I'm going to ask you about Lantern. I think you're pretty familiar. You're familiar with that model. Am I right?
Yes. I have some familiarity with it. Yep.
Do we like what they're doing? Is it a competition for you? How's that work?
It's like you want me to be candid. I'm gonna try to be diplomatic. Listen, I think it's a great concept that is an extension of the Drizzly platform,
right?
In my opinion. However, alcohol delivery and cannabis delivery are two totally different beasts, both on mostly on a regulatory standpoint. In alcohol, you have the 3-tier system between the manufacturer, distributor, and actually the retail. And so there's a lot more ease and flexibility of movement and a lot less onerous expenses, such as people in the car for delivery and cameras and all these other things. When you add in all those, I believe the model is a little bit more difficult, but what I can say is that they're aggregating a ton of products from across the state or the area onto one platform, which I think there's positives and negatives to that. You could essentially have a suite where people are like, oh, I could get anything I want, like Amazon. or you can create a totally anxiety event for people who are like, this is too much merchandise. And that's the risk I think a lot of us are going to have in cannabis. At least in a brick and mortar retail, you're limited to the amount of square footage shelf space that you have. So the amount of products that you can offer is dictated by how much square footage that you have available to do that. On a digitized platform, it could be infinite. So you have to figure out that balance. And, I don't know what the number is. Is there 1,000 products? That's great. Or is it 10 to 20 products? That's great. So you have to figure out if it's a right business move on your part. I think Lantern, I think it might not be as easy as the Drizzly model. And I think it's going to be some complexities that they're going to encounter when they first start out. And they're going to have to be agile to figure it out.
It's adapt and improvise. That's the mantra of most entrepreneurs and startups out there. We're getting up close to the bottom of the half hour. And at the bottom of the half hour, we're actually going to give away our first story to people who have taken the time to go onto our website and tell their story, their cannabis story, and shared it with us. And we've had pretty good response. We certainly want more. We've got about 3 more months to go. We got 3 more of these cannabis storage units. I'm going to hold it up now. I'm going to hold it up. The story container. Oh, it's not right side up. There you go. Okay. It's childproof. It's smell-proof. And it has tremendous canisters inside that for the cannabis connoisseur, they'll certainly enjoy having places to put their variety of cannabis products, if you will, and they can enjoy that. We're going to be giving one of those away, and you're actually going to hear the winning person's story. We're giving away 5 T-shirts to finalists, and one of those finalists is going to win this story device. It's a little bit over $200 American for this, but it's a sturdy plastic, the best part, childproof and smell-proof. And I can attest that it is truly a smell-proof device, just because I've had stuff in it and you can't smell it. It's pretty obvious. But we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll come back with our panel. We'll play the story of the winner, and then we'll get more into our discussion as the Green Rush Live continues after this.
Hi, my name is Emily, and I'm 61 years old. I live in Miami, Florida. And my sisters and I suffer from IBS. And over the years, doctors have given us pills to try to control the nausea, which we have frequently. And one of the pills they've given us is called Zofran, and it started out being $90 a pill. And it's supposed to be the best thing for nausea, and it works infrequently. But in more recent years, I discovered that one hit of pot will almost completely eliminate my nausea problem. And, if you have ongoing nausea, it's horrible because you don't feel good and you don't want to eat, and it's just awful. So to me, why would you take a $90 pharmaceutical pill when you could just have one hit of pot? And by the way, inhaling the vapor or the smoke from a marijuana cigarette is so much better than trying to put a pill down your throat when you're about ready to throw up. So I owe a lot to marijuana for making me feel better, and my sisters feel better too. Thanks, everybody.
We're back.
Oh, go ahead, David.
And we're back. Thanks for waiting with us. And we're back to our Friday Green Rush with a great panel of guests talking about delivery.
Right. But before we go back into the show, David, we want to congratulate Emily. I'm not going to give her last name, from Florida, for taking the time to send in a video story for us to share with our audience. And by the way, how simple is it to record a video these days? If you know how to use Zoom and you know how to actually click a button that says record, you could actually send us a video story of your cannabis story as well. But you don't have to. If you'd like to text it in, we've had some great stories. There are at least 5 finalists. You're all going to get your t-shirts. I'm not going to name names right now, but I'm certainly going to say congratulations to Emily for being our first winner of this storage. And based on her own personal story, it looks like she's going to be able to use it properly and responsibly, which is what we preach here. Now, let's get back to our delivery discussion. And specifically, because Bill Perrier is with us and he's our insurance expert, tell us about the challenges about insuring the delivery and where some of the industry people are embracing it and some aren't.
Sure. Well, we have a challenge here today from an insurance standpoint regarding workers' compensation, which is, by law, you have to have it in Massachusetts. Not all states have it, most do. And also commercial auto. Because this is a very new coverage, there is no historical records. You know how insurance companies have to look at history, trends, they get the actuarials involved. There's nothing to go on. So what happens is insurance companies, geez, I don't know if I want to be the first company to kind of look at that. So right now, if you have a delivery license, you have one insurance company, I'm not going to name them, one insurance company that will insure you. You cannot go anywhere else because they don't offer it. And then for workers' comp, you have what's called the assigned risk pool. And that's basically a hodgepodge of bad drivers that have high rates. Again, that's where it's gone. Not drivers, it's people that have bad work comp history, haven't paid their bill, things like that. So you don't want to be in that pool and that stew, but that's where the workers' comp for cannabis delivery is. The big companies, even the small companies, just don't want to touch it. So I've spent the last 6 months, finding solutions for a lot of the people that are in this vertical. And I think they're going to be very happy if we get a chance to talk to them about what we have for them. We have choices for them, companies that can write in Massachusetts, and took a long time to get it done, but we're very excited about it.
Hey, Aaron, as someone who's got a delivery company, I hope that means you're going to be able to get insurance for your drivers too, right?
That's my hope. We're going to be doing a webinar with Bill. 1 second, with Bill in a couple of weeks to actually spell this out. I think it's a misconception out there amongst social equity and amongst, I'll call it, CDA members who falsely went out and said that Amazon is going to develop and destroy the world. Shame on you for just false allegations or just a lack of just a total disregard of facts. Delivery is expensive. It is downright expensive. It's actually probably more expensive to operate a delivery than it is a retailer because your scalability is it's difficult versus say a retailer. I can have 2 cashiers and have 1,000 people line outside the door of a dispensary and see them with those 2 cashiers over an 8-hour period. For me, 1 car, 30 deliveries, then I have to get another car get the incremental, another 30 or 50 deliveries. And so when you see stuff like that, and then you see the line items like car insurance and workers' comp, it does make it a little bit more difficult. Your margins are going to be more compressed. I think you have to be a little bit creative. I'm going to be talking to Bill, and we're going to get real deep into it. I'm a finance guy, so I love the numbers. So be prepared for when me and my wife come at you on this one. But there are ways around it. If you're creative, especially if you understand the numbers, I think you can get something out of this. But it's one thing that I think a lot of people who are trying to get in delivery are not fully taking into account the many, many line items. And then let's not forget about the greatest line item called 280E. So you have that on top of it too. So that's just, we're prepared for it. The sticker shock that Bill made us aware of was a sticker shock. But we can figure it out. I'm not concerned about that aspect of it.
If I could dovetail on Aaron's point, in the marijuana industry, premiums have to be paid in full, but the companies I work with have financing. So yes, you are paying that amount of money over. You're paying it, but it's not $30,000 down. It's over 12 months. So I think that helps with some folks. They a rate depends on a lot of things, like a credit score and things like that, how old you are. But I want people to know that it's not just one lump sum like it is with other carriers. We're really trying to bend over backwards to be, an advocate for folks in the delivery program.
So I want to go back to James for a second and ask him a pretty simple question. How's business? Are you able to make money? Are you able to make a living out there? I mean, how is the business of adult use rec going in your dispensaries?
Yeah, as you know, we have 2 stores, Pittsfield and East Boston. They're very different kind of stores based on that geography.
Yeah.
It was very odd. 2020, there's so hard to look at any financials and, make any kind of assessment. So we had a period of time where we were completely closed, no adult use sales, and we had to manage through that. I'm very thankful to our team that hung in there and our board who supported that. And then in the middle of the pandemic, we opened in East Boston, so that was a very unusual event. I think most of the cannabis companies in the industry and in Massachusetts, my colleagues that I spoke to, we did well during the pandemic. There's no doubt about it. People were home more, they were more apt to spend their money. Maybe they got stimulus checks, et cetera. I think we're seeing some normalization now of people getting back to work and back to kind of their normal daily lives, weekly lives. So we'll see what happens, but it's been a wild, year and a half. It's just been crazy.
I hope you're keeping notes and so that when you write your book, you've got all the details right and can share that a little bit, because I'm guessing that there's going to be some incredible stories out there. David, I've asked you this question. With all these regulations and stipulations and insurance costs and liability, why are people wanting to get into this business?
Because it's cool and it's the latest, greatest, neatest thing. Right, Aaron, you agree or disagree on that one?
Listen, this is the way it is. When I was on Wall Street, I remember idiots going out there buying cell towers. Then we had the whole fiber optic craze. Then we had the Human Genome Project. Now it's Bitcoin. So yes, this is new, sexy, attractive. Delivery is seen as a disruptor in general. Cannabis is the cool space to be, but it is a business and it is an industry. So it's not going to be all that cool to get into if you don't know how to operate and execute. So, I think I think people think that if they build it, people will come and they'll just throw a pile of cash at you as they're walking through the door. And I don't know, I don't own a dispensary, but I can imagine James could probably attest that people would just come inside their dispensary and throw bricks of cash in your face. So it's probably not that easy.
Yeah, I mean, to Aaron's point, you have the business side of it, but there are a lot of us, I got attracted to what the plant can do. And, I got in the industry in 2014 because I thought this is going to change.
We're definitely getting
to be an industry that, we really are supporting changing people's lives is really amazing.
All right. We got a little audio interference. Life interjected itself into the Green Rush Zoom room a little bit there. James, if you could just repeat that again, because I did not hear it because we were battling with, let's just say background noise. Go ahead.
Yeah, Aaron was talking about, the disruptive industries that he's seen, and, cannabis is certainly one of those. And there's a reason on the business side to get into the industry. But there are a lot of us, including me, who got attracted to the industry because of the most recent education about what the plant can do and how it can change people's lives. In 2014, when I got in the industry and I did my research, I was like, this is where I want to be. You can work for a lot of companies, but to be able to be in a new industry where you can bring this kind of wellness program and for patients, real relief for people. And, I'm really happy to be a part of that.
Let me ask you a question. And I know Aaron and David specifically have a lot of experience going in front of investors and talking to them. when people ask you, can you describe your typical customer? What does that look like, and how challenging is it with this new industry?
Yeah, sorry, Jimmy, was that for me?
Yeah, I think I want to start with you, and then I'll go back to the other two guys. But what does the typical cannabis consumer look like these days, now that a few years into legalization?
Yeah, I think we have seen a pretty wide demographic, but I think if you wanted to generalize, they are people looking for alternatives. Alternatives on the rec side to alcohol and other, forms of feeling better. And on the medical side, alternatives to pharmaceuticals. There's plenty of new research out there that we've seen, for example, people reducing their need for opioids by using cannabis. So yes, great, applaud that. When I first met Dr. Jordan Tischler, he was doing a presentation. One of his slides was, here's the problem with alcohol. Your body treats it as a poison, trying to get rid of it. Here's the problem with cannabis. Euphoria. That doesn't sound too bad. So, there's the bifurcation of the medical side and the rec side, but I think in the end, it's people who are more open to finding alternatives that are less harmful to them.
Yeah, you mentioned Dr. Jordan Tischler, and I'm going to do a shameless plug here because that's what I do. He's actually Dr. Mary Clifton's first guest on the Doctor's Lounge, which is a new show that we're introducing also this Wednesday night, right before the Cannversation with Dave Briggs and Calvin Johnson and Rob Sims. So I'm pretty sure Jordan just got named the #1 medicinal cannabis doctor in the state. And you know what? It's great. He's a good guy. And he was there the very first day that I walked into NECANN in March of 2018 that started the In the Weeds podcast, which got us to this point now where we're now live streaming 24/7 on our website. And this is the first show that we have live streamed on LinkedIn, on our LinkedIn page at Pro Cannabis Media. So now it's YouTube, it's Facebook, it's LinkedIn, it's Twitch, and it's Pro Cannabis Media. I say that, and I cannot believe that we've been able to pull all this off. And it takes the efforts of a lot of people that I give a lot of credit to, including our video director, Dan French, who's still listening. And he's probably wondering why I'm closing the show. And I'm not. I'm just taking the time to do a kind of a toss out and a thank you to the staff at Pro Cannabis Media, people like David Rabinovitz, who for whatever reason continues to want to hang around with me. And this is the second business that he's been involved as an advisor with us. So I thank you too, David, for the efforts that you've put in this. Where do you think media, what role can media play as the cannabis universe starts to evolve into normalization? And I think every one of you has an opinion about how media treats the cannabis industry. And it's one of the reasons why I started this company, because I wanted to give a professional voice and respect to an industry that I think deserves it, because they've done they being the government and the regulators have done everything they can to make it as difficult and as challenging as possible. But it takes people like James Winokur and someone who understands it. You know what? I want to get into this business because I feel like I'm helping out the world. So David, what role does the media play as far as telling the stories of what's going on in the industry? And are you frustrated with the fact that perhaps traditional media is not telling these stories?
Jimmy, we're living in the whole industry is like a counterculture, right? Banking is difficult. You're hearing from Bill, insurance is difficult. Raising investment capital is difficult. You can create a great product, but you can't bring it across state lines. I mean, this is it. And we have our own media sources, right? Mainstream media will talk about when something happens legally, but they're not as focused like you are, as an example, on telling the stories of what's going on behind the scenes. And I think when marijuana gets legalized, it's only going to take a year or two. When it becomes legal at the federal level, the industry's all normalized and it looks like any other industry, it's going to melt into the background within a couple of years. It'll be like anything else. It'll be nothing special. It'll run like every other business. There'll be new products coming out, interstate commerce. And and the world will not fall. The sky won't fall in and the world won't end.
Will we ever see cannabis commercials in commercial media? And I'm going to ask, let's go to Aaron for that answer. Aaron, what do you think? Do you think we're ever going to see as many Bud Light commercials as you see in sports? Are we going to see commercials for Jerry Garcia's Handpicked or Paul Pierce's Truth brand?
Yeah, I mean, follow the money. That's what this always comes down to. It's not legalized right now because big pharma, big ag, big beer, whatever you want to call it, big alcohol, they haven't set their pawn pieces in place yet to fully capitalize and imperialize the entire industry. So when it does happen, their lobbying dollars, millions and millions of dollars, are going to flood into every politician's pocket. You see how John Boehner, who used to hate cannabis, now all of a sudden fully embraces it with his 2-year, $12 million consulting fee. So you spread enough of those 2-year agreements around Congress. Oh yeah, it will be on TV. You're not going to be allowed to put it to your mouth or smoke it. Similar restrictions to alcohol. You're not going to actually be able to drink it on a commercial. But I believe in some facet, in some shape or form, it will be in commercials, it will be on media. And I think subsequently, what you will then see is a backdoor marketing campaign similar to what they've done to cigarettes, alcohol, even gun manufacturers, where they're paying Hollywood to put these spots within their films, to put them within their shows. And you'll start to see it becoming a little bit more ubiquitous then. And then all of a sudden you'll wake up at 9 a.m. and you'll see Kelly and Ryan Seacrest enjoying a pre-roll while talking about today's events in Central Park. That's the way I see it progress. I'm a very methodical person. Not going to say it's going to happen in that standpoint, but it's going to happen in that standpoint.
Interesting. Bill, what's your feeling if you look into your crystal ball? Where do you think we're going to go in the next 2, 5, 10 years on this?
Yeah, well, when I was on your show before the pandemic, seems like 25 years ago, maybe. I think I mentioned to you that portable drinks, coffees, things like that, beers is going to be the future because everybody wakes up in the morning and has their coffee or their tea or their stimulant or whatever gets them through the day. Most folks do, right? Have a cigarette, whatever. So it's going to be ubiquitous there. It's going to launch into, as Aaron was saying, movies, mainstream television. I can certainly see like the Bud Bowl. We used to have, the Bud Light Bowl. So, now it's going to be the Bud Bowl, and Bud's going to have that double entendre. But it is all about the money too, right? It's follow the money. Those that there are players that can play, and those who are watchers are going to watch. But I think this is, my kid's 14. I think by the time he's 21, he doesn't really have to care about legal drinking age because he'll be doing something else, So I think it's here to stay. It's going to grow until the next, thing that that was prohibited comes out for mainstream acceptance.
Shrooms.
James, I want to get your feeling and about that as well, and then ask you specifically, and we'll get into this next, about billboards as a vehicle for your company. Have you considered them? Haven't you considered them? What is your opinion about that? And then what about commercial media? Are we ever going to see a commercial for Berkshire Roots on 98.5 The Sports Hub?
I sure hope so. I think, Aaron, kind of hit it on the head. We're going to move someday to having all those sponsorships, product placements, et cetera. I do think, like with beer, I'm hoping companies like us will still exist as the local craft, just like we have craft beer. Sam Adams has found a way to consider themselves still craft beer because they go by a number of barrels produced. So I think you will see the big Budweisers, and hopefully you'll see companies like us exist. And we'll want to do advertising like, any other mainstream company. We do advertise on billboards. We've been doing that for a long time. I would say there are billboard wars out there. You guys probably see them on the Mass Pike and everywhere else because we're so limited on, where we can place ads.
Right.
The restrictions, if you don't know, are based on demographic studies that the billboard company can do to show 21 plus, more than 85% is, seeing that. So that's an avenue that we take advantage of for sure.
And since you're out in the Berkshires, which is, you know, a driving distance away from New York and Vermont and even Connecticut, and are you near the borders? Are you over the borders? What are the regulations about that, and where do they exist?
So Pittsfield's right on the New York border.
Yep.
We have a great community out there. I know a lot of you know New York is going to go rec. When is the question, how long that's going to take to get the real regulations in place.
Mm-hmm.
But we also, in the Pittsfield Berkshires area, is a big tourist community. So we have a ton of people that come in for different seasons, depending on whether it's ski season or fall leaf peeping season or summer activities like Tanglewood. And we have a lot of people that have second homes from all over the place. So it's a little different. It's not just a border town or, you know, Massachusetts border in New York. The Berkshires is, you know, a draw for a lot of different reasons. So we may see some impact from New York, but I don't think it'll be as much as a town that might just be on the border and doesn't have that kind of tourism.
Right. And can I ask a percentage of out of state versus in-state sales? Did you have that figure off the top? I'm sure you've looked at those numbers.
Yeah, we do look at it. As I said, it's a little bit hidden because just from looking at someone's license doesn't tell you if they have a second home there.
Right.
You know, they're on vacation, so they're there for a longer period of time. But I'll just say it's a healthy percentage that are out of state.
There's a lot of competition out in Western Mass. Quite a few dispensaries out there. Lots in Holyoke, a lot in the Great Barrington area, which is considered the Berkshires as well.
Right.
How friendly a competition goes on amongst the other dispensary owners out there? Is there enough to go around?
There's enough to go around. I think in the industry, unlike maybe other industries, there's a lot of co-opetition. We do help each other. We're selling wholesale to each other. So there is a lot of that. So it's hard to be just completely competitive. You know, we're buying products from, you know, Theory, for example, has that great seltzer product. You know, we talk all the time. There are other ones that we don't talk as much because maybe that's all they do is retail, so we're not buying from them. But I'd say in Massachusetts, generally, we're all very helpful. As Jimmy knows, I happen to have a number of colleagues who are running other cannabis companies just coincidentally. So that makes that network even friendlier.
Yeah, absolutely. Hard to believe that they all came from Boston College too.
Weird phenomena.
What's next, guys? I mean, I don't want to get into the political climate in Washington, D.C., even though I love Aaron's opinion about this. And I'm not going to put you on the spot here, Aaron, but I do quote you often when people say, oh, it's going to be legalized federally. It's going to be legalized federally. And I'm like, don't rush into that, because my pal Aaron Goines keeps saying this would be a big mistake at this point in time because the federal government just isn't ready to regulate this at a federal level. You still agree with that, right, Aaron?
It would be a thermonuclear disaster. One thing
Another great quote. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, one thing that's consistent with the government is no one could do something so wrong, so often, so consistently, and spend so much money doing it wrong. When I think of federal legalization, I think of about 10 or 20 different alphabet departments who are going to fight amongst themselves on who controls what. I could see one department saying, hey, we're going to regulate THC, while another department is going to say, hey, we're going to regulate the entire rest of the cannabinoid profile. And then you have the IRS. They got to get their take. So on top of that, breaking down those borders at this time in a nascent, emerging frontier industry that we're still in basically means game over for any social equity, small, independent player to ever have a chance to get into this space. You thought it was difficult now. Let those borders come down. It is game over. You have handed it over to the 10 largest players in the state, and Berkshire Roots will get acquired because they're going to give you a hell of a bid and you're going to accept it. And so you're going to see a massive amount of consolidation, and you're going to see an oligarchy in the actual industry. I just don't think we want to do that at this particular time. Let's not put people in jail over the plant. How about we deschedule it? Let's have some banking like a normal industry. and allow it to develop with blue sky laws intact and define borders and let that kind develop. And then we all come together in a 50-state kumbaya. Let's just slow it down. And we know why the federal legalization is really getting pushed. I get it. People don't want to go to jail for it. I get it. We want 280E to go away. No. The way that it works, I've seen this many years on Wall Street. When the big players have their pawns in place and they're ready to pounce and dominate and imperialize, that's when federal legalization happens. And that's why you don't want it to happen at that point, because you're doing it at their whim. And you are just essentially relegated to being their sharecropper or their beckon boy. So that's my piece on it. You could take it to the bank. That's how it will develop if these state laws do go down.
Well, there you go. Hey, Bill Perrier, how do people get in touch with you?
Very simple. I'm Bill Perrier, Charles River Insurance, 508-740-3082, 508-740-3082.
And James Winokur, Berkshire Roots. You can go online and find it in East Boston and Pittsfield, right?
BerkshireRoots.com, Pittsfield, East Boston. If you go to ziprun.com, you can pre-register. So when delivery's ready, everything's set up for you.
Oh, so you can pre-register for that right now.
Correct.
On Ziprun. Yeah, fantastic. That's good news.
Correct.
Aaron, Emerald Turtle, how's it going?
Going great. Got our ACA in Wareham for cultivation, product manufacturing, delivery operator, and transport. And we're now doing our PNS on our second location just outside of Boston. So we're ready to launch our delivery operator whenever the CC is ready, with 2 hubs ready to attack the state. So I think it's going to be healthy competition. I think the pie is large enough for a lot of people to enjoy success.
There you go. And I'm can't wait to see this all happen. I'm happy to be documenting this little part of history. And I think in a lot of ways, I'm blessed that we're in Massachusetts, because I do feel like we're not afraid to talk about difficult subjects. And cannabis is right in the middle of that right now. David, do you want to get noticed? Do you want to get found, David?
Depends by who, Jimmy. Depends by who. But I can be found here every Friday from 4 to 6.
That much, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media who puts this thing together every Friday. Remember, after this show, after this live stream, we've got our We Talk News. And I got to tell you, we have stories now from 5 different Cannacaster correspondents from different states, and all the headlines from each state are covered in New Jersey and in Illinois and in Michigan, Vermont, DC, and New York. Deborah Borchardt reports from Times Square in New York on this particular news. And we also have those stories about Paul Pierce's company, Paul Pierce's brand coming to the Hubcraft, and also Calvin Johnson talking about 50% of the NFL players, at least 50% of the NFL players, enjoy, imbibe, and partake. So keep that in mind. Keep your live streaming going right here. If you miss it, if you need to go out and have some dinner, go about it. We're on demand on our Roku channel. We're now live streaming on LinkedIn. And of course, 24/7, our Roku channel is available on procannabismedia.com. And trust me when I tell you this, people, it's a lot easier to find us on the website than through the Roku streaming channels and the Apple TV apps and all the little confusing things that every 25-year-old certainly understands a lot better than I do. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Coming up on We Talk News this week.
Hey, Hubcraft, the truth, win-win.
That's right. Another celebrity brand heads to the Bay State, and this one's in the Hall of Fame. Speaking of Hall of Famers, PCM TV's Dave Briggs had his first Cannversation with Megatron, also known as Calvin Johnson from the NFL.
In your estimation, how many guys in NFL locker rooms, at least in your day, did smoke?
Yeah, over 50% of the guys.
And Massachusetts launches home delivery of adult use cannabis. Weed Talk News this week is next.
Pro Cannabis Media Programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry. And by Artery Pay, easy, cheap, fun, and legal, just like cannabis should be.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi everyone, welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. Lots of great stories for you this week, but I ask you, have you told us your cannabis story yet? Go to our website and enter to win with yourstory.com. That's your story with an I. A great child and smell-proof storage container system for the cannabis enthusiast in your life. But first, another sports celebrity enters the weed business, and this guy needs no introduction for Boston Celtics fans. Paul Pierce has signed on with the Hubcraft. And what do you think his strain is going to be called? It's going to be called The Truth, of course. And that strain will be coming to the Hubcraft Bay State dispensaries before the end of this year. Here's Shivani Dallas, the Hubcraft's Chief Strategy Officer, with that announcement.
Hey Massachusetts, we are so excited to bring Paul Pierce and his new brand in cannabis to the Massachusetts market.
Truth brand coming to stores near you, Massachusetts. I'm excited to be partnering up with Hubcraft. Hey, Hubcraft, The Truth, win-win. Check us out, coming soon.
The Hubcraft will have 3 dispensaries in Massachusetts, including Holyoke, Clinton, and Fitchburg. The other big story in Massachusetts this week is the start of home delivery for weed. And if you live within 15 miles of Taunton, you could get freshly baked. Of course, you could probably achieve that anywhere, but in this case, it's actually the name of the delivery company that opened up operations this week. Ron Marshalsea has that story.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. For the first time in Massachusetts, if you are an adult over the age of 21 and you want legal weed delivered directly to your home, you can do that, especially if you are in the Taunton area. Freshly Baked is the first delivery service to receive a comments operations notice from the Cannabis Control Commission. Their first groundbreaking delivery went directly to the founder's home, part of a test run before the company starts taking real orders from the public next week. The first recipient was one of the co-owners, Jenny Roseman, who received her order from her partner and co-owner, Phil Smith. The two are veterans who bonded over how cannabis has helped with their anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder, saying they want their newfound delivery business to help veterans who struggle in public places and may not want to leave home. Freshly Baked is working with an online cannabis delivery platform called Lantern to accept orders and will operate within a 15-mile radius of the Taunton area. Rules for the delivery are such as the vans must be staffed by 2 employees and equipped with a GPS tracker, cameras, and a secure storage area. They cannot operate as rolling dispensaries that carry a mix of inventory to be parceled out as orders arrive, instead carrying only pre-prepared orders for specific customers. As a result, all Freshly Baked deliveries will arrive the next day, which also gives firm time to plot out an efficient route. It is important to note that recreational deliveries can be made to any municipality that hasn't banned retail pot shops. The commission also requires customers to submit their photo ID online for pre-verification, and every doorstep transaction must be filmed by a body camera, with the footage retained for 30 days, a measure meant to protect drivers from theft and guard against sales to minors. One license type enables delivery coming directly from a dispensary, and one is directly from a wholesaler. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
This week, the National Football League and their Players Association announced the creation of a $1 million fund to study the use of cannabis to treat pain. In the last collective bargaining agreement between these two sides, both the players and the owners realized it was time to take cannabis off the list of banned substances. Now, the league's chief medical officer, Dr. Alan Sills, has now recruited a leading doctor from the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital right here in Boston to be the co-chair on this new pain management committee. His name is Dr. Kevin Hill. He heads up the addiction psychiatry department at the BI Deaconess, and Hill is on record as saying the level of interest in the use of medical marijuana is greater than the evidence from the research available. So the league hopes to award 5 grants for research from that $1 million fund. In the meantime, more and more former NFL players are getting into the cannabis business after their careers are over. One is Hall of Famer Calvin Johnson from the Detroit Lions. Nicknamed Megatron, he and a former teammate, Rob Sims, are opening a dispensary in Michigan called Primitive. Next week, we launch a new show on our network called The Cannversation with Dave Briggs. Both Rob and Calvin joined Dave to talk about the cannabis culture in the NFL.
The NFL has its own cannabis culture, believe it or not, between the guys. And the ones that are smart about it are able to do it safely and respectfully and just be able to move forward.
The first day they test you is 420. Is that irony or just punishment?
They got a weird sense of humor up in the league.
That's a very weird sense of humor. Rob talks about a cannabis culture, Calvin, in the NFL. Tell me more about that. I mean, in your estimation, how many guys in NFL locker rooms, at least in your day, did smoke?
Yeah, over 50% of the guys, whether it was a constant thing or just for social or just for healing. I would say over the half of the locker room. I would want to say way more than that, but maybe 60-70% have experience with cannabis. So college, think about it. you're going to come in contact with these things just on the person. To find what's their choice to help them find solutions for their pain. And their whatever discomfort they have.
That Cannversation with Dave Briggs and the entire interview will live stream on PCM TV and ProCannabisMedia.com on Wednesday the 16th at 9 p.m. And then, of course, it will be available on demand on all of our distribution platforms. So, what's up on the state legalization front? Well, it looks like Connecticut will become the next New England state to legalize adult use of cannabis. The Senate there passed the bill, and with Governor Ned Lamont's expected approval, it heads to the Connecticut House. Unfortunately, Republicans in that chamber have decided they'd like to slow down this process, and the state session adjourned without a vote for now. Now, no one is sure when it will be debated on the House floor before it becomes law. Connecticut's Democrats still think they could push it over the finish line. If that happens, Connecticut will become the 18th state to legalize the sale and use of cannabis by adults. Now, one state that is already reaping the tax benefits of legalization is Nevada. That's where the world's largest dispensary, Planet 13, continues to set sales records. With that story and more, here's the Green Market Report's Deborah Borchardt reporting this week from Times Square in New York. Deborah?
This is the business update for Weed Talk News. This week, Vireo Health changed its name to Goodness Growth Holdings, which is similar to the company's retail store name, Green Goods. The company also changed its ticker from BREOF to GDNSF on the OTC marketplace. Jushi Holdings got caught up on their financial earnings releases this week. The company delivered full year 2020, fourth quarter 2020, and first quarter 2021. Now, for the first quarter, revenue increased 29% sequentially to $32 million. Jushi also forecasts that for the second quarter, revenue should be in the range of $40 to $45 million. But that sounds great. It's a little slower growth than what the company has been experiencing. And finally, Planet 13 reported record sales in May as Las Vegas comes roaring back to life. May is the third month in a row that the company has had record sales. For May, they recorded $11 million, and sales are even better than before the pandemic. And Vegas hotels are quickly selling out as tourists return from lockdowns. I'm Deborah Borchardt, reporting from Times Square with the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
What's going on in Colorado? You know, that was the first state in the union to legalize adult use of cannabis for recreational purposes. Well, now the state legislature there wants tougher packaging requirements on concentrates, and they also are looking to tighten up the rules for the under 21 adults to obtain a medical card. Yes, that means 18 to 20-year-olds in that state can get med cards. The bill under consideration also wants to put a buying limit to 8 grams per day. Now, this is the same state where the governor, Ned Polis, just increased the possession limit to 2 ounces instead of the 1 that had been on the books for years. The adult use chapter continues to unfold slowly in Vermont. Here's Jessie Lynn Dolan with that report. Jessie Lynn?
Thanks, Jimmy. I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the We Talk News Vermont report. Vermont's latest cannabis bill has become law. Governor Scott signed S25, which will go into effect immediately. While the cannabis community is going to have to keep pushing to make sure our commercial cannabis market is grounded in justice and equity, this at least helps us move forward on finally getting to retail sales. The Cannabis Control Board continues to meet weekly with ample public comment opportunities. This week's meeting focused on updates and input from small cannabis cultivators, policy advocates, and service providers. All 3 board members have committed to prioritizing cannabis social equity in Vermont. Board member Julie Holbird said they have a historic responsibility to build a foundation for which inclusive and restorative practices are the cornerstone of the cannabis industry. With support from Tiernanog Candies, Colonel Forbin's Finest Cannabis, and several other Vermont cultivators, Vermont Cannabis Nurses Association gifted over 200 bags of cannabis edibles, 5 dozen cannabis clones, and 11 ounces of cannabis flower over the last 2 weeks. That's the Vermont report for Weed Talk News. I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
So, do you know anyone with a cannabis conviction in Arizona? There is hope that by this summer, the records for thousands of current inmates serving time for limited cannabis offenses will be expunged. After July 12th, they can apply for expungement if the conviction is for possession of under 2.5 ounces and even for paraphernalia or growing. Now, let's check in with the Midwest and Michigan's Rick Thompson for the latest on what's going on in that state. Rick?
Thank you, Jimmy. This is Rick Thompson with the Michigan Report for Weed Talk News. Let's begin. 2.5 years after Michigan voters elected to legalize the adult use of cannabis, battles are still being waged over citizens' rights and commercial presence in cities and towns. Flushing Township will vote this week on restricting caregiver and patient growing activities. Whitewater Township's anti-cannabis Parks and Rec leader gathered signatures and placed a question on the August primary ballot with the intent of shutting down businesses proposed for her community. And many other cities have ordinances with restrictive intent in various stages of approval. The rush to regulate comes after a court decision last year paved the way for communities to impose reasonable restrictions on personal cannabis activities. The court failed to define reasonable, and communities are scrambling to enact ordinances before a new court decision rescinds their authority to do so. Speaking of restricting the rights of individual citizens, the Michigan Cannabis Manufacturers Association was dealt another blow this week. You've heard me talk about how a small cadre of commercial big shots wants to cut back patient growing rights by 75% statewide, and the boycott of their establishments they earned as a result. Well, national seed company DNA Genetics on Monday pledged their support for caregivers and patients in a blistering interview with industry experts. The beleaguered trade group has taken such a beating that they hired a new spokesperson to help restore credibility. And it's none other than the previous head of the entire state cannabis regulatory system, who's now a compliance specialist with LiveWell, one of the offending corporate entities. She's been on the job for less than 48 hours and has already declined an interview with me. Looks like she's picking up right where the previous spokesperson left off. This is a national story which grows more intense every day. Keep listening to Weed Talk News for the latest updates. And that's it for the Michigan Report. I'm Rick Thompson for Weed Talk News.
Anybody for bong hits on the Las Vegas Strip? It could happen. Massachusetts-based Curaleaf has entered into a strategic partnership with Rolling Stone magazine. Curaleaf's Select brand will do just that with Rolling Stone's help. That media company will select the brands to co-market. They are pre-rolls and a pod system that carry that co-brand. Now, there will be a lot more visibility for these co-branded products because both Curaleaf and Rolling Stone will be announcing a first-of-its-kind retail space in Las Vegas in 2022. Remember, Nevada is looking to license social cafes as soon as the legislature there can figure out how to do that safely. Now let's check in with Illinois and see what's going on in that state where they seem to set sales records every month. Here's Margot Vaselli with the Illinois Report. Margot?
I'm Margot Vaselli from Margowana with this week's We Talk News Report from Illinois. Illinois set a new sales record just this past May. As of May, over $116 million in sales have been coming from recreational marijuana sales. And now, since the state legalized recreational marijuana in January 2020, the numbers have been staggering. Experts are predicting that we will reach over $1 billion in sales by the end of this year. Illinoisans are now awaiting the governor to sign off on the new proposed 110 additional license bill amendment. The original bill was signed by Pritzker back in 2019, and critics are declaring that it left out minorities that it was supposed to be supporting. That's the Illinois Report. I'm Margot Vaselli from We Talk News.
You know anyone who's considered a COVID long hauler? I do, and it's really debilitating. You can have brain fog, musculoskeletal pain, heart palpitations, headaches, fatigue, and depression for months. Well, there is hope because researchers are finding now that certain cannabinoids, you know, the chemicals in the cannabis plant, can help rid some sufferers from those symptoms. Both the Journal of Biomolecular Structure and Mechanics and the journal Frontiers in Pharmacology conclude that cannabis can be an important therapeutic plant for fighting post-COVID symptoms. Might be a good time to visit the medical dispensary. In New Jersey, another one has opened, and Tara Masu Sargente has that story. Tara?
I'm Tara Masu from Blazin' Bakery, and this is the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News. This week, New Jersey opened its 19th dispensary, Zenleaf, near Quaker Bridge Mall in Lawrence, New Jersey. Zenleaf is owned by Chicago-based multi-state operator Verano. This marks their 78th dispensary nationally and third in New Jersey, with also having locations in Elizabeth and Neptune. Like all New Jersey dispensaries, it is medical only for now, but is likely to be grandfathered in once the 21 and over market opens and they have enough cannabis to meet demand. Executive Vice President of Verano, Anthony Marsico, said, "We have experience in multiple states expanding from medical to recreational use, and we always prioritize patients." Jim Kaunacki, the mayor of Lawrence, said the township did their own research, which they began years ago to get ahead of the curve. And the mayor said residents of Lawrence voted 71% in favor of legalization, so the need to allow sales was obvious. The town, however, will not allow consumption lounges with any of their dispensaries, but will permit delivery once the state has regulations guiding it. I'm Tara Masu from Blazin' Bakery, and this has been the New Jersey Report for Weed Talk News.
Now it's time for another research study that the level of THC in your system is not a fair indicator of impaired driving. The National Institute of Justice conducted a research study on 20 people and concluded just that. With more details from what is going on in our nation's capital, here's Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast with the DC Report. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC Report. A bill to allow researchers to study cannabis products from state legal dispensaries cleared a House committee vote this week. The measure was approved by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee as part of a larger transit bill and will now head to the full House for consideration. The pertinent provisions within the Invest in America Act would allow researchers who are currently limited to a single approved source of cannabis to study the products that cannabis consumers are actually buying and using. The measure also calls for the Department of Transportation to work with other federal agencies to develop a report on providing access to samples of various cannabis strains and products for research. A study funded by an agency of the U.S. State Department finds that THC levels are not reliable indicators of marijuana impairment. Sponsored by a grant from the National Institute of Justice, the study looked at 20 people who either ate or vaped cannabis with varying levels of THC. Subjects were then given standard field sobriety and cognitive tests. The results show no correlation between the levels of THC in the subjects' systems and their sobriety test performance, regardless of how the cannabis was ingested. The study found that while THC does lead to impairment, the concentration of THC in the body does not accurately indicate the degree of impairment. The NFL, along with the Players Union, plans to begin funding research into the therapeutic potential of cannabis. The Pain Management Committee, a joint commission of the NFL and the NFLPA, announced it will award up to $1 million in research grants to study THC, CBD, and other compounds as alternatives to opioids for the treatment of pain. The announcement came at a press conference this week where committee co-chair Dr. Kevin Hill said, quote, "Clearly there are a lot of great ideas in this space, and there's a lot of important research that needs to be funded." The Pain Management Committee was formed in 2019. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
The state of Maine has set another sales record in May with over $5.36 million of cannabis sold. That breaks April's record by $1 million, and the tourist season is just starting in vacation land. And finally tonight, in an effort to encourage more vaccinations against COVID-19, Washington State has implemented a new incentive. Yes, it's joints for jabs. If you get a vaccination, you can walk off with a free pre-roll for the plus 21 crowd, of course. And not to be outdone, the liquor industry in that state counters with a shots for shots incentive. Yes, only in America. That's Weed Talk News for this week. I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Hi, I'm Ben Schauer, New England rep for Salient Video Management Systems. Let me tell you what makes us different in the security space. We're your trusted advisors for all your security needs. I know how complicated the regulations are in cannabis, and working with Salient Systems will be the polar opposite of that. I give free consultations and will walk you through every step of the process so that you can get what you need at the price you can afford. We're robust, we're simple and scalable. We're Salient Systems, your solutions to all your security needs. Please contact me at the information below, and I'm looking forward to being your trusted advisor.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are